Most people you talk to when transitioning out of the military have never actually transitioned out themselves. You're probably getting a bunch of opinions from people who plan on staying in until retirement and have no idea how to actually show empathy for your situation. This podcast is about providing fresh perspectives and a front row seat for conversations with successful veterans doing big things after leaving the military.
And that's how I made $1 million.
What? You didn't tell me?
Oh, did you record that?
No, I forgot.
Oh, that would have been valuable information for everybody.
Yeah, we'll have to learn your lessons again, Jack, after you make another million. After the 10 million.
Obviously that was a joke, but I think so many people are out there talking about how they had success and they're like, here's the lottery ticket that I used for my success. And it's like, dude, that lottery number was already pulled. That doesn't work. If you're going to listen to a coach, make sure they're not just telling you what they did in 2010 to make $1 million. Like, how is it applicable now? Is it replicable? Can we actually do this again? Or is it just a lottery ticket that is already used and might as well be thrown in the trash?
And there's nothing wrong with coaches that have had a lot of success have a lot of experience or later, but also, like we mentioned before, sometimes the best person to listen to advice from is only 2 steps ahead of you, not 20. So it's not somebody who has a massive following, who has decades of experience, while that is also a worthwhile person to listen to in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the person who just went through what you're about to go through. They can provide you more timely and probably accurate information for whatever you're doing.
Yeah. And that's what I tell people about the podcast too. I'm like, we've interviewed the full spectrum. We've interviewed people who just got out, who are or maybe not even out yet, right? They're in the middle of their SkillBridge or something. We've also interviewed people who've been out for 30 years and who maybe either retired from the military or did just 5 years. And we had a lot of successful people, but I feel like we really highlighted unique stories across the board.
For sure. I think if you look at our episodes and our guests, you would think that there's not, maybe I'm biased, but you would think there's not necessarily as much weighting on certain career fields or industries after getting out of the military, and there certainly are. We've just very selectively diversified it through the guest list rather than concentrating on the most common places, because frankly, you can probably get a lot more of those conversations a lot easier. You can get a lot more perspectives there. And so we felt it was more prudent to cover a broader array and more varied perspectives, but with the goal, of course, of making the military transition process easier, one conversation at a time. And I think that we've done that for quite a few people that have listened.
Yeah.
I have an interesting stat for you, Jack.
All right. Let's hear it.
So we had 54 episodes. This is number 54 that we're currently recording. Haven't missed a single week in the last year plus of doing this project. But 50 of those episodes have been with unique guests. So we're doing this one. We had a kind of a midway point episode at number 21 where we kind of recap things, and then you and I did some initial ones at the beginning. But what's interesting is I looked at the number of countries that this has been listened to across our kind of followership, and it's been 27 countries across the world. I would not have guessed that. I don't know. And maybe it's some guys that are like on deployment or have PCS to Europe or in Asia, but like there's a number of countries on there that don't have any US active bases in them. So there's a lot of, this is spread in a way that I couldn't have foreseen, at least. And I was just very surprised.
It's all the people who listened to the podcast and experienced immediate success and were able to afford European and other vacations. That's right. What it is.
I've seen great success in America. I'm now going to settle with my family in the country of Chad.
Correct.
Live it up, man.
Yeah. That's great. I guess maybe that's just a function of Apple Podcasts, or I don't know. It's just, we are far reaching.
The movement,
right?
The veteran venture across the world.
Our advice is applicable to Chad as well.
Yeah. I just threw out Chad. I can't remember off the top of my head if that was one of the countries, but there were quite a few countries that I was very perplexed at how someone was in that place. Maybe it's just somebody has I don't know. I'm not a tech guy. Maybe somebody's got a VPN that's like looking like they're in Albania for the summer or something, but
they to know that they're listening to our podcast.
That's right. So many secrets on this. But anyways, so one kind of topic I think would be great to start with is something that we've addressed on several episodes, and we talked about it on our kind of episode 21 recap. But at the time we said 3 things to do when you're getting out. I think we could probably expand that to 4. But one being the SkillBridge program. There's been some updates to the regulations there and how long that can last and certain stipulations with SkillBridge. But it's still a phenomenal opportunity to be free labor for a company, get your feet wet as you're still getting paid by the military. Second one being that using the VA home loan, preferably for a multi-unit place, for 3-unit property, Third one is taking your VA medical claims process seriously. And then fourth is leveraging your educational benefits. So all of that can be summarized in kind of the VA comprehensive package of veteran benefits. Tremendous things to do that sadly a lot of people don't utilize. A lot of people don't have a chance to do SkillBridge or don't know necessarily how to capitalize on the opportunity. And then, as you know very well, the VA home loan is, what is it, 15% of people actually have used one. It's just astoundingly low.
And not only that, but even fewer people are aware that there's state benefits as well. So dive in there, go to your state website and figure out what is on your state website as far as what your service actually can earn you or your kids, right? We've talked about states providing college compensation for the kids of service members. There's a lot out there that you can access just by doing some research, scholarships. We've had people most recently on the podcast where they literally paid for multiple high level degrees with just one GI Bill benefit. And it's just like, go out there and just discover. Don't take no for an answer. Just ask the next person who might be able to help you out and ask people who have done it before. That's a huge takeaway there.
Yeah, when you mentioned the state level educational benefits for the state of Wisconsin, I immediately went and searched for North Carolina. And similarly, North Carolina state schools, like you can get free education with certain qualifications. It's incredible. And a lot of states offer that sort of thing. So tremendous point. But yeah, leverage those educational benefits, whether it's post 9/11 GI Bill, the VR&E that we talked about with Adam Whistler a little bit on the recent episode. And then, like you said, the veteran specific scholarships too. There's a lot of scholarships specifically for veterans and their spouses or families.
Not to get like real minute with this, but like even the 173rd has like a scholarship. Like if your kid writes an essay, the 173rd, I think it's like $1,000 that they'll give them for college. And it's like, they probably don't max out those scholarships, right? It's like, just go to the veteran. If you were an alumni of any brigade, I guarantee First ID has an alumni organization that gives out scholarships. Have your kid write the essay and get $1,000 for college. It's like, it's not that hard. Get out there, figure it out. Look at all the organizations that are out there that you were a part of, and there's probably something that you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And then with those, two things that we talked about previously, one is start the process early when you're transitioning out. At SkillBridge needs some lead time. The VA medical claims process needs some lead time. But all of these things, like it all just works a lot better if you were proactive about this process. I think a lot of people have triangulated to about 2 years in advance, at least 18 months in advance of your ETS date, if possible. Begin planning this stuff, having conversations, putting stuff in place for your family to settle down and wherever you've decided, or looking at jobs, interviewing, the whole 9 yards. The sooner you can start, the better, and really kick off that timeline in the right way. And then once you're out, or as you're on your terminal leave, this is maybe a controversial topic, but consider taking a short break after service. I would be a hypocrite telling you to do that because I did not do it myself. Same with you, Jack. And a lot of people fall in the same boat as us, that we're just like ready to get on to the next thing, itching to start our lives in the civilian sector and double dip, if you will, while you're on terminal leave and trying to earn another income. But several people have talked about how valuable it was to them to have, whether it's just like a month or a couple months, maybe 6 months to a year, if you can afford it, to take a step back, assess what you've been through, really reflect on your time serving, and make sure that you're climbing the right mountain as you approach the next thing.
When you're in the military, you realize a lot of people care about what your career is and what your rank is. And in turn, you kind of have to care too, because that's going to impact how you progress. But when you get out, and to your point about taking a break, a lot fewer people care about what you're doing, what the title is, how much money you're making. And it kind of slaps you in the face. Like a lot of people pursue those things right off the bat, and they realize that's not what is scratching the itch anymore. It's actually maybe finding a career that's in an organization that you absolutely just love being a part of, or pursuing something that you just don't necessarily see as work. And I know that's cliche, like you find something you love, you never work a day in your life, but it is even more applicable to somebody who's transitioning out of the military, especially if later in time, like if you're retiring, or if you've already made good rank. The rank you have on your chest means a lot in the military, and for good reason, right? Rank is a very impactful thing. But when you get out of the military, if you're a director of operations for a chip company, like you might not love that. even though you're a director and you're making good money and it scratches all these itches, it might not actually be what is good for your family long term.
Right. Yeah, I think to your point, there's three typical losses, if you will, or three things that people feel like they are missing once they transition out. And again, this has been kind of corroborated across all the conversations we've had and conversations, all of the podcasts that we've had with between ourselves and others. One is the loss of purpose. The second is the loss of tribe or your people that you feel a lot of camaraderie with. And then the third is loss of security. And that's security in the sense of a stable paycheck, guaranteed benefits that are typically free, depending on your service, a very defined career path or trajectory that's completely laid out for you. Again, can fluctuate a little bit, but all those things we can almost take for granted when we're in, how much security they provide, not only for us, but for our families. Of course, you're moving every couple of years, but there's a lot of structure around it. And when you get out, those three things are all of a sudden evaporated.
I know I told this story when we first had the podcast, but how Courtney and I looked at it is we valued the security from the military. When we looked at getting out versus staying in, the Army and the military seemed like the known option. And getting out was like the super unknown. And it was about maybe a year before I put my packet in to get out. I flipped that completely around and I was like, wait a second. No, getting out of the military, you know where you're going to put your head down at night. Your family knows what's going on. You know where you're going to live. A lot more is known. The only unknown is the income, oftentimes, right? And whereas in the military, you just know what you're going to make for the next 20 years. You can literally look that up. But then we realized, well, the income is probably, and this isn't for everybody, but generally speaking, the civilian side offers more compensation than the military. So once I realized that, I was like, wait a second, it's actually getting out is the more known quantity. And that helped with me swallowing that pill of like, okay, no, let's make the trend, let's make the leap and let's do this.
What allowed you to make that transition mentally? Like what kind of flickered on that light bulb for you?
I think Courtney and I valued security a lot, right? That this idea of knowing because we want to avoid debt and we want to save a lot and we want to build long-term wealth. And the way to do that was to guarantee that the income was coming in and make sure that we could follow that. But when I don't know what really triggered the difference, but it was realizing that maybe having a family, right, is like the things that I value on security aren't just money, right? It's not like I'll always be able to pay my bills. We're not going to be homeless. And that's not to say that there's a lot of people who transition out and end up in that realm. But that's the kind of point of this podcast. If you change that mindset of the lack of security on the civilian side is actually okay and you make that leap, you just really have to lean into it and make sure that you're providing your own security. Like you still need security. You can't just take things for granted. But my point isn't that the civilian side just, oh, it's just secure. You're good. Like it's fine. My point is that you're able to seek out your own security and provide that through hard work and just being diligent, especially during the transition.
Right. And I think it's also just making that conscious decision, right? Like you embrace the inevitable. You were getting out. There was going to be some changes. And then you dove headfirst into making sure that you crushed the next chapter, that you took on the next adventure, and that you and Courtney and your family were in a good place to do that. And I think that's the point of these discussions. Like you mentioned, it's inevitable that people are going to feel these losses. They're going to feel loss of purpose, loss of tribe, loss of security. And it's not an ominous thing to be afraid of. It's just recognize that's coming, recognize that it's inevitable, regardless of what you set up, regardless of how proactive you are, and then start to continue, be ready for it. And we're about to talk through 10 of the major themes from these first 54 episodes that we think are helpful in approaching that situation and dealing with the inevitable three losses that you'll feel. Because regardless of how far somebody has been out of service, or regardless of how long they served or how they served or what their job was, every single person has mentioned those same three. And even if they're the most self-aware, self-secure person in the world, or someone who is on the other end of that spectrum, we all feel it to some degree. And so it's just a matter of being ready for it and taking some proactive steps to respond to that happening. But so with that preamble, here's Jack and I will dive into 10 major themes or lessons from these first 54 episodes. So Number one being define your own success. I think it's probably better to phrase this as defining your own success. It's an ongoing process that as you change and adapt as a person is going to constantly be an iterative process. One thing we've seen is it's very easy to follow a certain path because that's what others have done or that's what you think is equal success. But we've had a lot of people on the episode ask, are you chasing your own definition or are you chasing somebody else's definition? Because there's a pretty standard career path after the military for high achieving, especially special operations type folks that they go get a top tier MBA, they go to investment banking, they go work for a private equity fund. All of a sudden, they're 10 years down the road having transitioned, like, man, I don't feel a whole lot of purpose in what I'm doing. I'm not quite sure what direction I went. And that direction is right for a lot of people, but it's just because you think that's going to pay well or you see other people posting about that and it seems shiny on a LinkedIn status update doesn't mean it's the right path for you. So it does take a lot of introspection to define your own success.
I want to stay a little bit high level with this, but what I want to ask you is how did you go about defining success for yourself and your family when you're looking at the transition?
The approach that I've taken and that Liz and I kind of thankfully we've had some influences along the way that kind of encouraged us this direction is we started I did two big things that I think kind of help inform this whole process. One is the vivid vision planning process. And so I used to be someone who tried to chart 5 years out, 10 years out. And I realized quickly Griffin in 10 years is going to look dramatically different than how I look right now. And so trying to plan for 10 years is probably a futile process. And it's not worth the time I'm investing in it. But 3 years out, it's enough time to really change a lot of things. But it's also, if you just do 1 year goals, I think that's great too. But it's not quite enough time to enact some massive changes in your life. So 3 years is kind of that happy medium. And the vivid vision process is as simply as very clearly thinking through and describing what your life looks like and not worrying about the how you get there, not worrying about the messy middle of achieving that kind of vision and write it out as if I do it as if I'm like a third person writing a newspaper article or magazine article about my life 3 years from now and our family's life and who we're spending time with and what we're doing and what's important to us and our values and that sort of thing. And constantly iterating on that process has been really helpful to really define the big picture, where we're going, and then we can fill in the how we get there along the way, but start with the what it looks like.
I love that. And going deeper than just how much money you're making and where you're located and what your title is, like what are those three things providing you and your family? What does happiness look like? What does health look like? Who are you spending your time with? That sort of granular look at the vivid vision is, I think, incredibly beneficial to help drive how much money you need to make and where you want to live and what title, what job you're actually going to pursue. And I think that's oftentimes just overlooked because you think the first thing is it's going to lead to that. I really think you're going to start with the base or the deeper level look at like what you want your life to be like in 5 to 10 years. And then we can draw that back and figure out what it takes to actually get there. I was like, this isn't super exact, but it's how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time, right? The happiness is the elephant. You can't just be happy. You got to figure out what it's going to take to be happy. And I did something similar, like I think 2 years ago or whatever. We created this like 10-year goal and we broke it down, did the vivid vision based on your recommendation. And it was like, again, it's like, what does health look like? What does our family look like? What does our religion look like? We kind of defined those things with pretty granular detail. And then we went, what does year 9 look like? What does year 8 look like? What do I have to do in year 8 to make year 9 a reality? And we walked that back. And by the time we got to year 1, it was like super specific stuff that we had to do this year to get to year 2. And then to years, but it grew on it. And I look back on that every 6 months or so, and I reevaluate, I tweak. And it's funny, humans are pretty capable, right? Then you look, oh, I actually accomplished that goal. Okay, now year 2 doesn't seem so crazy, right? But 18 months ago, year 2 seemed like it wasn't even possible, but accomplished this month's goal, which led to the year goal, which led to the 5-year goal, which led to the 10-year goal.
And what you'll find is everyone says if you want to accelerate your 10-year goals, just work. The natural inclination is just work harder at it, do more. But what you'll find is when you're as deliberate as we're talking about this sort of process, you will accelerate those long-term goals, and it won't feel like you're doing more. It won't feel like you're just grinding harder, but because it's a much more deliberate process. And when you kind of spell out this vivid vision, the universe starts to conspire to make it happen alongside you. And that's kind of the magic of doing this sort of practice. And you mentioned the categories too. I do something very similar to kind of break out the vivid vision into faith, family, friends, finances, and fitness. So all the 5 F's. It's a little too much alliteration, but it's a helpful way to break it down into those important categories. And then one other thing, Jack, I think is, well, I think it's tremendous to set goals. I think there's something that has to preface goal setting, and it's setting your own standards. I don't think enough people deliberately take time to set. I love the 3 to 5 rule from the Army, it never fails. Set 3 to 5 standards that you can remember off the top of your head that define how you take action, define how you set your goals, define how you live your life. And I think that should be the foundation rather than just jumping into your goals, making sure those goals align with how you want to, your values, your morals, how you want to live your life, how you want to treat others, that sort of thing. And so setting those standards has been really critical for our family as we kind of decide on what our goals look like and what we want our lives look like.
Yeah, I think that's super applicable. And just something we said a lot at the beginning of the podcast was like, do the thing, right? So once you set those goals, once you set those standards, adhere to them, right? Do the thing that you say you're going to do. And I think, oddly enough, when you do what you say you're going to do, I think you feel more accomplished and you feel more respected. People around you see that you are doing the thing you say you're going to do. And I just think it compounds on itself and it makes you feel good. It's like it just confirms in your brain that you're doing the right thing, regardless of what your goal is. Just do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Could not echo that more resoundingly. Another final piece to this number one, I know this has been a long number one, but a lot of people say you can't have it all. I would actually beg to disagree. I think you can pretty much have it all, just not all at once. You can do all those different things. You can pivot in life. You can pursue different career paths. You can completely reinvent yourself, which we'll talk about in a second, but you can't do it all at the same time. There's not enough hours of the day. There's not enough bandwidth. You have to have priorities in that season of life. And that's going to pay huge dividends to focus. Some people focus for a lot longer than others, but you can't have it all, just not all at once, and be okay with that. And having this big picture allows you to see in what sequence or what ways you can work towards having it all.
Right. Yeah. I know you know this. I'm a huge believer in that. I think whatever you put your mind to, you are able to do. If you want to be a best-selling author, did you play video games for 2 hours last night or did you write a chapter? Your actions need to support whatever you're trying to pursue. Now, am I going to be in the NBA? No, probably not. Like, I think that ship has sailed for me. But within reason, I think top 1% level success in any realm is pretty able to be done as long as your priorities are set and you actually adhere to what you're saying. So this might sound a little rough, but like put the video games away, put the phone down. I'm going to butcher this, but it was pretty early in our one of our episodes. It was like make your hobby your pursuit of whatever you're trying to do. So if you're trying to be, I don't know, a car salesman, make your hobby researching cars. Make your hobby the thing that's going to support your long-term goal as opposed to the thing that's going to detract from your long-term goal. Not to put you on the spot, but who was it that was like, yeah, dude, I think, was it Maurice? I think it was Maurice that was like, no, I went to the library and
Yeah.
I like read and read and I became an absolute expert in the thing that I'm pursuing. And it's like, yeah, like that's what you need to do. Like put the phone down, put the video games down, and do the thing.
More than likely, anyone listening to this is a very high achiever who has unlimited potential and is going to be successful in nearly whatever they pursue. So they're naturally going to be a little obsessed with things. If you can funnel that obsession towards that same direction that you're going, then the world is yours. Like the speed and efficiency with which you compound skills and compound knowledge are just going to be astounding. But yeah, if you can make that direction your obsession and your hobby, like you mentioned, then that's really the unlock.
I don't like the word regret, but with our podcast, frankly, and not to say this is a negative, but we did focus on the person who's capable. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're getting kicked out of the military and or you're not looking at, like, you're like, dude, the prospects are not good. The economy's not great. I'm struggling to maybe even get a job at Costco, stacking cans on a shelf. If that's where you're at, just we do think that these still apply to everybody. And I think the mindset of knowing that you can do it, if you start to convince yourself or start to believe that, you will start to make the decisions in your life that will support success. And frankly, Nick Smallwood is a great example of that, where I'm sure he probably thought his prospects were pretty slim getting out of the military. And now the dude is one of the most successful logistics companies in the world, literally. Those types of things don't, no matter where you're at listening to this podcast, take these guidance, these words of wisdom seriously, and it will have a positive impact on your outcome.
Thanks for saying that. That's a very important point. And also, even if you are a capable person listening to this, but you just are burnt out from the military and you don't have any desire to go chase something big right now, and you just want to go work at Home Depot and not have to think about people or problems for a little while, that's okay too. And we still think that these points apply to you and can be really helpful in your pursuit for what's next as you're working at Home Depot or whatever is next for you to kind of take a step back and take a knee. So with that in mind, a lot of people listening to this might say, okay, define your own success. That's good and great. I don't know what I want. How do I go from there? And so that leads us to number two, which is I would recommend start with what you don't want. It can be virtually impossible to know exactly
Uh,
what you want when you don't have the experience or the data points to inform that choice. And so take the inverse. Start with what you don't want because you probably pretty clearly can define what that is.
right. It is easier to define what you don't want. People, no matter where you're at, it's very clearly, I do not want to work at this place. And I think just that alone gets the ball rolling if you're feeling stuck in your transition, or you're like, yeah, I'm going to adapt this a little bit. It's not hard to get out of the military. It's just easier not to sometimes. And if you don't start to prep for your transition, you might just kind of blink and spend an extra 10 years doing something that you didn't want to do or didn't enjoy doing and didn't actually further what you're trying to do. So just start the prep now. And I think the first thing you might be able to do to get the ball rolling, if you're feeling like you're in a rut as far as what you want to do, start with what you don't want to do.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. All
So
right.
number three, if you chase money, it runs. A great quote from, again, Maurice Philogene from an early episode. But it goes back to a lot of conversations we've had with chasing money and chasing title with your first job. And it can be really enticing to do, especially coming off of serving in the military, which compensates you generously in adventure and camaraderie, but not as much in fiscal compensation. So a lot of people can feel like they're trying to make up for lost time or trying to take advantage of certain opportunities in the civilian world. And I'm not saying that's all bad. Like, for sure, go after big things and pursue what you're passionate about, but just beware of going after the wrong things that you look back and feel very empty.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think something, I don't know, maybe I think it was your quote. I don't know if you got it from one of the podcast guests, but it's not just the money thing, but also advice. So, like, if you ask for advice, people will give you money in the form of opportunity or a job or something. But if you ask for money, people are just going to give you advice, right? Like, and it's like that, and that makes sense because nobody as a mentor is going to be like just giving handouts. That's not how a mentor receives value. And we mentioned that too, like when you're asking for help from a mentor, think about how, like, what are they getting out of it? They're not getting anything out of it other than seeing the fruits of their labor through you. So one, give them feedback. A month later, call them up again, be like, hey, you know that thing you told me? I did it and it helped me in this way. That's how you pay back a mentor, and showing that you actually took their guidance and took it and ran with it. Because frankly, that's all they want. They don't want you to pay them. They're not asking for tips. It's like they just want to see that they actually had an impact on you. And and I think it's the same thing with this money quote. Chasing money, it's not going to work, man. It's the abundance lifestyle. I think something that's driven our life is that there's an unlimited amount of money out there. You just have to do the right thing and you'll attract people who are like-minded and who are trying to accomplish the same goals, right?
Well, we get used to wearing our resume on our shirt when you're in the military. Everyone can see the tabs you have. They can see your rank. They can see your badges. They can see all the shiny, fancy things that you've accomplished. And it's out there. You don't have to tell anyone. You don't have to advertise, I've accomplished X, Y, and Z.
I still
So
did. I still would say, like, did you know I graduated from Ranger School? Even though I'm on the
just
tab.
well, you just walked with one shoulder forward. Look no further.
Everybody's had that guy that like shakes your hand and like kind of pulls you over. Like what are like why are you doing that?
I still do that in civilian clothes.
Right.
But yeah, and so it can be enticing to try and create that public resume in a way through whether it's a LinkedIn profile or whether it's accomplishments that get announced. Like it can be really enticing to try and recreate that public kind of it can be like a weird sense of humility. Like I don't need to say because everything speaks for me. And so you can all that to say, be aware of that tendency. And again, it's kind of a personality thing. So maybe a lot of people it doesn't apply to, but you no longer have your resume on your sleeve. And so it can be tempting to try and overcompensate for that in some ways.
Yeah.
The other thing I would mention with the money point before we move on is we've talked about in a previous conversation. I think one of these was, I know we talked about it with Chris Sandor on his podcast episode. We talked about it with a few others. It could be worth taking a little bit less pay to gain certain experience or exposure. And this is probably more applicable if you're at like a small or mid-sized company or startup where you might be taking a pay cut even from the military pay, but in exchange you have maybe there's a potential equity package or something. There's other compensation structures, but also the ability to wear multiple hats. Like you could learn some incredible skills, get exposure to all kinds of invaluable knowledge through working for something like that. And so maybe it's not as applicable if you go to a Fortune 500 company and just have a more standard transition, but there are potential routes where you could take a financial step back in order to gain things that are going to pay exponentially down the road.
Right.
And
Right.
similar with that, like it could be worth doing that to build hard skills. Chris Sandor did specifically mention that, whether it's technical skills or finance, analytical skills, there's some positions you could take that are for the purpose of developing those hard skills because we have so many soft skills, namely leadership, communication, doing hard things, all these things coming out of the military. But what we oftentimes don't have, and there's some occupational specialties that do have more technical skills or hard skills, but by and large, most of us, especially if you have combat arms background, are not going to come out with a bunch of technical skills. And so there could be
Yeah.
some experiences that are worth taking, even if it's a step back or lateral move, worth doing to gain those more technical abilities.
I think that's a great bridge to just iterating and experimenting to find what's right for you as an individual. And something I recall from a previous podcast is just because you were in the military and you learned how to be a good follower and a good leader doesn't mean that you're going to be primed for a big company to where you're just inserted into Amazon and then now you have subordinates and you have superiors and you just have a career path. There's some people who are entrepreneurial and that's going to work out for them. There are some people who get out of the military and they're like, dude, I couldn't imagine having everything be just on me and starting a business. I want that structure. I want to be able to be told what to do and communicate that effectively. And just that's where my bread and butter is. But it's almost like you got to figure out who you are and whether the entrepreneurial route is going to work for you or whether the schooling route is going to work for you or whether it's an employee type of situation or a combination of all three, right? We've had the full spectrum of people on the podcast. So whatever you're thinking is going to define your next career goals, I think there's going to be an episode for you, whether that's direct, just straight entrepreneurism. We've had people just start companies from scratch, be like they had no experience in clothing companies. And they're just like, you know what? I love it. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to dedicate myself to this. And they're crushing it. We've had people who get out and they go to grad school at a successful, and then they go work for Amazon. And it's like, okay, got it. Like that works for some people. It's like whatever's going to provide the most benefit to you, but allow yourself to iterate. And I think one of the takeaways from here is you're not connected to a contract the same way that you were in the military. And most people, especially on the officer side, some people are like, no, I'm five and done. I know I'm getting out. But I would say more often than not, you're thinking that a 20-year career or more is likely what you're going to pursue. Get out of that mindset. And even if you want to show loyalty to the company that you're going to be with, but don't think that if you're in a rut and you hate where you're at, you can just leave tomorrow. It's like, go do the next thing. Take the 6 months of experience that you got, and now you know something that you don't want to do, and you can move on to the next thing.
That's right. So number four that you hit on already is experiment and iterate to find what's right for you. Again, we talked about it has to be what's right for you. It shouldn't be somebody else's track. It shouldn't be the definition that society has set for success post military or post special operations experience. Like, iterate to find out what works for you. And I'd recommend following energy. Like you said, if you hate something, you feel like it's draining you every morning, you wake up Monday morning or you go to bed Sunday night and you're just dreading that next week, that's probably a sign. I can imagine that you and Courtney, having found things that you love to do, you probably are not dreading Monday morning, and you also work for yourself. So you guys are probably excited to attack each week and each day. And everyone can find something like that. It's just a matter of iterating until you find it, iterating until you start feeling that energy. And maybe it requires tweaks. And maybe you find something that half and half is like part of it energizes you, part of it is like completely draining, but continue to press into that and go after where you get that energy and where you feel lit up. And it's okay to figure it out as you go. That's what everyone else is doing. We're all kind of just building this parachute on the way down from the plane. Hopefully you drop from a little bit higher than 1,000 foot AGL because you don't have a whole lot of time from a low drop like that, but you're all just figuring it out as we move forward. I think another big point here, Jack, is as you're finding what's right for you, we have had so many good stories on here about people reinventing themselves. And two of which come to mind immediately. One is Ben Balsley. He had excelled at several different industries since he left the Army. He's now currently a CEO of a large private equity roll-up. He talked about the book Range by David Epstein, which is, again, I've mentioned it far too many times, but one of my favorite books in the world, where it's actually one of the topics in that book is actually advantageous to have a breadth of experience because that ultimately can allow you to approach new and novel problems in a different way that maybe industry insiders have not seen or not approached it before. And I actually just heard an interview with David Epstein, the author of that book, and he said, breadth of training translates to breadth of transfer. And what that means is the broader the array of problems you've solved for or been faced with in the past, the more you've been forced to develop kind of a flexible models that can then be used to solve future problems. And so you now have this great toolbox to solve different problems with. And that only comes through varied experience and through a breadth of what he calls a breadth of training. So reinventing yourself. Again, one more example is Nate Boyer, who we had on the podcast. He was Special Forces Green Beret, went to play NFL football for a little bit after being a long snapper at University of Texas. Then now he started a locally sourced meat company in Texas. He's an actor. He's reinvented himself a handful of times, and I think he's only 40 years old or mid 40s. So that's okay. It's okay to do that. I'm sure everything he approaches is even better. And again, some people would argue like he's not compounding because he's not in the same career field, but I would argue the opposite. I think that you can still compound as long as you're bringing those same skill sets and the building blocks continue stacking as you have more varied experience.
Well, it's kind of like the Eisenhower quote, right? Like plans are worthless, but planning is everything. It's you can, especially with getting out of the military, what you thought you were going to do might not end up being what you're going to do. But the effort, the connections on LinkedIn, the people you reach out to, the communications. I think your example, right? Like you communicated with somebody who then said, hey, actually, this would be a great option for you and introduced you to the owner of a company that you ended up working with, right? And it's not about the direct connection all the time. You're not going on LinkedIn and saying, will you give me a job? You're going on LinkedIn and saying, hey, tell me about your industry. What do you love about it? Help me understand what the drawbacks are and what gets you excited about this. Because then that can start to help inform your decision and might lead to a connection. Maybe you don't get a job from that specific interaction, but they might say, hey, I'm in San Diego and I know a guy who's starting something that would be right up your alley. Maybe I'll make the introduction, and then that could lead to a conversation down the line about employment.
And that leads us perfectly. I promise folks we did not practice this, but fantastic segue, Jack. Leads us perfectly to number 5, which is everyone wants to help you. And it's kind of the networking point, but you've already hit on a little bit. But I think what you mentioned is having that curiosity is so critical. Several people have talked about how many informational interviews they did. They reached out to people, cold called people, messaged people on LinkedIn, whatever it might have been. But they had dozens, if not hundreds of informational interviews to kind of inform what they want to do next. Like we mentioned before, it's hard to know what you want to do, but it's easy to know what you don't want to do. And you can
Mhm.
really inform that through these conversations, and curiosity needs to lead. The typical quote, the best way to endear yourself to somebody is asking them about themselves. And so this curiosity, like you just mentioned, is truly just asking them about their lives, what lights them up, what excites them about their job. That's going to endear you to them and also make them more willing to provide other connections or help you in some way. And so, but back to the original point, everyone wants to help you in this journey. But at the same time, it's you need to work towards it. It's not going to be just handed to you. But I think we've reached out, we've had 50 guests on here. A majority of those are people that we didn't know. We just either cold emailed them, cold messaged them on LinkedIn, whatever method of getting in touch with them. And our hit rate was nearly 100%. We reached out to some big names, some people that we had no business talking to, didn't know us from anyone else, yet still took an hour plus to talk with us on this show. And so it just goes to prove that if you just take the step, make the connection, and lead with value, like you mentioned, lead with curiosity, like people are going to go out of their way to give you some time and help you out.
Yeah, the best example, I think, as far as episodes are concerned, about people just like reaching out on LinkedIn and seeing results from 100 conversations is Max Pumphrey, right? He just said, "Hey, 2 years away from my retirement, I'm gonna reach out to people in the city that I want to go to, and I'm gonna find people at the company that I want to work at." And he just had tons of conversations with people because he's a genuine dude and he was fact finding. And those fact finding conversations eventually got him having a conversation with the HR department that ended up being like the interviewer for him to get the job. And it's like, dude, I already know you. And I not only do I know you, but I was introduced to you by somebody who I trust, who you also had a coffee with. It's like you got to put the effort in. You got to show people that you're willing to basically meet them probably beyond halfway, especially when you're transitioning out, because you have that benefit of being a veteran. You have that benefit of people already thinking that you're probably going to crush it and work hard and be reliable, but you need to reach out your hand first. You need to start building the bridge and initiate it. And then that's how you take advantage of what you're kind of getting free for just being a veteran. You'll get the phone call. Similar to just if you're looking at grad schools, right? Like you might get lucky and get into the grad school that you're trying to get into that was a little bit more elite just because you're a veteran. But you also have to take the GMAT or the GRE. You have to crush the interview. You have to prep well. You have to at least meet the standards, and then maybe being a veteran will get you in the door for you to crush it.
And I want to reiterate your earlier point of follow up. When you're talking to these people, they take time out of their day to give you free advice or whatever it might be. Follow up with them, because that could be, we talked with leading with value. And I love the quote, give 51% from 51 vets. And Rob Carrillo also mentioned that same, but always give more than you take. And part of that giving is just letting them know that you followed their advice, you listened, you took action, and you're completing that feedback loop that their time was worth it, that their time was valuable to make somebody else's life better. So I think, again, that follow up is so critical. And one little practical piece of advice on this point is I would highly recommend building a personal board of advisors. If you connect with somebody who particularly seems to be relatable, or that you find a lot of camaraderie with, or you aspire to be that person in 5, 10, 20, 25 years, write it down. Don't be overbearing, of course, but make a note or make a calendar invite or use a personal CRM or just a spreadsheet, whatever works for you. But get 3 to 5 of these folks as your personal board of advisors. It's nothing official, it's just in your head. But then make a note and a reminder every 3 months, every 6 months. Reach back out to them, just ping them, give them updates on how you're doing, ask if there's any way you can help with what they're working on, all this stuff. And you can just very quickly build your own personal board of advisors that's pouring back into your life. And I think that will pay enormous dividends.
I would say I'm more that way. I can crush a follow up. You know what I mean? Like that's one of my biggest strengths. But the difference is, and I think this is key for people to take away, if you're like, oh, that's just not naturally who I am, that's not how anybody is naturally, right? You work at it. The guy who remembers your birthday, he probably didn't remember it. He probably has it written down somewhere and he reached out on your birthday because he wrote it down because he cared enough. create systems that helped him follow up, right? And that's, I think the takeaway I want to get across there is you don't have to remember everybody's daughter's names. You don't have, if you're just naturally good at it, that's great. Courtney literally is, and I said people aren't naturally good at it. She just has this unbelievable ability to follow up with people and remember very specific details about their family, about their kids, about everything. And it's because she cares, right? But if you don't have that ability, it's still worth it. It's not disingenuous to write it down in order to remember it, right? That's just a way to do it. And if you, frankly, I kind of believe that if you do the effort of writing it down and creating a system,
That shows
that
care.
almost shows it shows that you care more, right? Because you're
Yeah.
actually doing, you're doing, it's not natural to you. You care enough to take actions to remember those things. And I think what you'll realize is the more you do those actions, the more it becomes more natural for you, right? And I think that's really impactful. And I think that's just being a good person, following up, especially with friends, with colleagues, with people you served with. I think it's really important.
Lewis Netherland in his episode said, when you need a friend, it's too late to make one. And I think the same thing goes
Yes.
with advisors. If you need an advisor, it's too late to make one. It's too late to
Yep.
build that connection, to build that relationship. So proactively start building those relationships, building that board of advisors, finding people that you really trust and admire and respect their opinions, and let them know that you respect their opinions and that you have taken their advice and followed what they said. Last point here is, and this is maybe should be a point of its own, should be a broader topic, but don't be afraid to ask for help. And that goes with these networking calls, information interviews, but it also goes with if you're struggling with the loss of things, if you're struggling with the lack of purpose or the lack of tribe or security, don't be afraid to ask for help. There's some tremendous groups and a host of amazing people that would do anything to help you with any of those things. So just some of the ones we had on this show, we talked with Mike Hall and Rich Gardner that are running Hold the Reins, doing therapy through equine, through horse riding and other things. Just phenomenal guys. We talked with Josh Otero with Alana.ai, which is a mental health counselor through an AI large language model that completely secure and anonymous, but can provide you counsel and access to care if you don't have it otherwise, or don't necessarily feel comfortable talking to a person or whatever it might be. And then the other one is the Valor Archery Challenge. I'd like to mention Sam Westfall. There's 1,000 different modalities to kind of deal with losing some of these things. And whether it's getting behind a bow and using archery to kind of, he mentioned a little bit of his stress, a little bit of his anxiety, a little bit of his depression leaves him every single time the arrow leaves his bow. And so I think there's a lot of power in whether it's archery, whether it's Brazilian jiu-jitsu, like we've talked about with Lieutenant General Farrader, being on a horse, like all these things. There's just so many resources out there, and listen to a couple of those episodes to see which one might fit you if you feel like that could be a fit.
Yeah, the arrow allowing him to deal with stress. Find whatever your arrow is, right? It can be anything, right? But symbolically, he created that as a way to deal with some of the anxiety and depression. And it's everybody deals with stress in a way, right? It's not like we're all just, there's certain people who are just stress free. Just figure out, especially transitioning from the military, the PT might go away. The things that helped you with dealing with anxiety and stress might go to the kind of get prioritized a little lower on the ladder. Figure out what you need to do to be able to continue to take care of yourself. That's super important.
100%. So that brings us to number 6, which is sell yourself. This is something that does not come naturally to us being in the military. We're so used to putting the mission first, the team first, the unit first, organization first. And not that changes dramatically. Like, I don't think it does at all when you transition to the civilian world. In fact, that loyalty, that selfless service is going to pay enormous dividends and be a huge asset to whatever you do next. But at the same time, you do have to start selling yourself, whether it's in interviews, whether it's for promotions, for raises, for all of that sort of thing. It's not going to feel natural, but it's a muscle that needs to be built in the civilian world. And also, if you start a company, like, you're going to have to sell yourself and your vision and where that company is going. It's going to be something that presents itself over and over. And I think while we oftentimes don't feel like we have experience with it, I think we actually have a lot more than we think selling our platoon to be the first one to go through a life, or whatever it might be, our company to be the priority on a range or with a PT test. So that, I think we still have that experience, but it's really just kind of codifying that and figuring out how you translate that into the civilian world. And being able to translate, like I said, I mentioned translating some of the soft skills, but being able to translate those things so that you can effectively present yourself as the solution to the problem that a hiring manager is solving for, or that a company is solving for, is critically important. The companies are hiring to solve a specific problem. And so really the onus is on you to translate yourself and your experience into the solution for that problem. And the more specific you can be with what you're looking for and where you want to go, what really inspires you and lights you up, again, part of that iterative process, the easier it is for people to help you with
Yeah.
that process. And also bet on yourself. I think don't sell yourself short in what you're capable of, because we've heard so many stories of tremendous bets people have made on themselves that have paid enormous dividends. We've also heard stories of people that fell flat in a number of things as well, but they just kept on going and kept on that experimental process.
That's one of the cool things about this podcast. It wasn't just an echo chamber of success of people just talking about how great things are and how everything went swimmingly and no issues ever. We had a lot of people talk about the failures that they experienced and how that led to pivots or transitions and what that did to enable their success in the future for long term. And I think one of the points here too is, and the main ones, is this idea of pushing yourself and what that looks like on the civilian side, especially when there's not like a clear path. So like in the military, pushing yourself is obvious. You show up to work every day, you go to ILE, you have your KD time,
Right.
you do the thing that they tell you to do, and then you make major, and then you make lieutenant colonel, and it's very obvious. But in the civilian side, you can stay in the same position for 20 years, right? Like not all companies are looking at the up or out culture that the military does, and they're fine with you. If like as long as you don't ask for too much of a raise, they'll probably keep you in that position for a long time. Now, the key there and the point that I think we mentioned that we wanted to hit was like you need to push yourself if you, and if you're not feeling that imposter syndrome or like you're kind of out of your comfort zone, then you might not be pushing yourself enough. And it's okay to feel the imposter syndrome on the civilian side because it's almost like as long as you're working hard and continuing to progress, you should feel like you're a little bit, all right, this is new territory, right? I'm not just crushing it. And frankly, Harrison Lewis, I think, is one of the best examples of this. Starts a clothing company with no experience in design or marketing or anything like that, and just tries to solve the problem that's in front of him. But it's like, dude, it was probably like, am I doing the right thing? I don't even know where to start, right? But he did start. He took the next step. He got the people who he needed to send him the clothes after he designed them. And now he's running a successful clothing company. That is the key to doing, and just like feeling a little uncomfortable is okay, and push through that. And that's what's going to lead to success.
So number seven, like you hit on, is if you're feeling imposter syndrome, lean into
Yeah.
that feeling, lean into the fear. I think it was Nate Boyer actually said, follow the fear. That's one way you know you're on the right track, is if you feel apprehensive or you feel like I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone here. Of course, you don't outkick your coverage, but that's a good indication that you're headed the right direction and really challenging yourself to be the best that you can.
That challenge doesn't resonate with everybody, but we also want to communicate with people who do see themselves as high performers, right? Big boy results don't come unless you put big boy actions. Like that's what's going to lead to success. And you kind of have to put yourself in an uncomfortable position if you want to have truly unique success, right? And I love that. I really want part of this podcast to speak to elite level performers. And I think that we had a lot of examples on here for people to emulate. And I think the other takeaways, almost everybody on the podcast seems like if you reach out to them and ask a question, they'd be willing to answer the phone and spend some time with you to make sure it works out for you.
That's right. Jesse Awuji, who we had on the podcast, he went from being a college football player to doing a traditional sales role and then just decided he wanted to become a NASCAR driver. Again, he had a little bit of a background, like he had driven cars before, but everyone would have said that's an impossible goal. And he reached it, he achieved it. And he said, don't just chase a goal, become the type of person who can reach it. And so I think that's really the message here. Like, you can become the type of person who's achieving these things that are making you feel imposter syndrome. You just have to, you got to become that person. It's really an identity shift.
Yeah.
So number 8 here is, we hit on a little bit previously, but you're not committing to a contract. You're not signing the next decade of your life away with these companies. Again, like we said, you can experiment, you can iterate. There's no official track in the civilian world. Julian Larimer equated to stepping off a conveyor belt when you leave the army. It's so regimented. Again, we talked about that with the sense of security, but your career progression is laid out before you. When you step off of that, it's like there's infinite possibilities, but that's also an overwhelming feeling. You can progress exponentially in the civilian world, but there's not like the professional military education system, especially for officers when you're in the army, that's dictating the timeline and exactly how things are followed. You can go whatever direction you would like, and that can be intimidating.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think choosing that direction, we've hit on it a couple of times, and I'm really testing your organizational skills here by kind of jumping out of order. But choosing the direction is important. But I try to apply this to my kids and any sort of mentorship that I find myself in. It's like if your goal is to become an astronaut, then you should probably start by taking a math class. But if you don't become an astronaut, that doesn't mean the math class was all for nothing, right? Like whatever you're pursuing to support that final goal, that path can be ever changing, right? And nobody goes, okay, I'm going from A to B, and B is when I'm 80 years old, and I took the path that I exactly knew exactly how everything was going to go. Like that just isn't how it works. So make sure that what you're doing to support your goal of being an astronaut also is kind of in line with maybe what the second or third tier thing that you're thinking of. If being an astronaut doesn't work out, what's that pivot look like? What is the other thing you're doing? And does your pursuit of being an astronaut support the other options if the first pursuit doesn't work out?
Yep. Number 9 here is lean on veteran resources. And pretty self-explanatory, but we've talked to people from Special Operations Transition Foundation. We've talked to 51 vets. We talked to Patrick Flood with Owners in Honor. If you're looking at entrepreneurship through acquisition, buying a business, we've talked to Mike Sherbakov with Founders Institute and other venture capital firms. If you're interested in startups or venture capital, and then there's great companies like the Honor Foundation and Bunker Labs, which is part of IVMF. The list goes on, but you'll hear, if you listen to a number of these episodes, you'll hear the same ones mentioned several times. And it's because they do amazing work. They've really put people on the right path. And 99% of these are completely free to the veteran. It's all out there for the taking. And I get it can be overwhelming. There's so many. It can be hard to know where to start. But I think just starting with a few that you hear on this podcast or a few that you have others that recommend to you can really help. And don't be, again, it's a humility practice. Don't be afraid to lean on those resources. They're there to help you. And there's people that have gone through exactly what you're going through that are ready to respond however they can.
Yeah, and I think a great point to highlight here is veteran resources are not just other veterans. So we had people that gave examples of like colleges that have veteran programs. If you reach out to a college, maybe it's not even the college you're going to go to, but they might be able to give you advice or guidance on how you can accomplish things or other resources that they know about because they're in it every day. And they could maybe reach out to those organizations on your behalf, or they could assist with that connection. And now you might be able to pursue something just because you had a conversation with somebody at like the University of Texas who maybe has a big veteran or a veteran support network for their college. You can call them. They're absolutely willing to help even people who are applying to that college. And it might open up the door for an organization or something that you didn't know about previously.
That's right. And then finally, number 10. So we've rounded up our list of 10 lessons or takeaways from all these conversations. But number 10 is transition is a lifelong process. I love that Jay Maselli said that because it is something that requires a lot of patience. It requires giving yourself a lot of grace. You could be a decade down the road. You could be 5 years down the road. You could be 25 years down the road. You still could feel some of these losses that we mentioned. You still could feel like you haven't fully adjusted, and that's okay. And you need to be patient with yourself, give yourself grace. And sometimes you may not see results as quickly as you expect or as quickly as you want. I think about Paul Weber's story building his fitness brand, his online coaching business. He was posting on Instagram and other social media multiple times a day, every single day. He posted over 500 times in 1 year. And he saw zero traction for the first 6 months. I think he said even up to like 9 months. He didn't see any progress whatsoever, but he persisted. Every single day he continued. And now he's got a thriving business, a large and growing following. And he's still the same Paul. He's still posting all the time. He's still consistent, but the results didn't come as quickly as he expected, and that's okay. You just gotta get through that valley of death, if you will. Be patient and keep pushing.
Right.
So those are the 10. And I'd like to round out here, Jack, with we end every episode with the same two-part question, one ask and one give. And so I'm going to ask it to us in reference to the podcast. And so I'll start us off. The one ask from me would be, if this podcast has helped you, those listening in any way, if you've heard something on here that's been helpful, just pay it forward, help somebody else going through the transition process, refer them to one of the resources that we've mentioned, refer them to one of the conversations that you found helpful. That would be my one ask, is just help somebody else through this process, because that's how we exponentially have an effect, is through the network of people being willing to go out of their way to help somebody else in there and going through the situation in your previous shoes. And then the one give I would offer is, if likewise, if you heard something on here that's helpful, or if Jack and I could be resourced in any way, reach out to us. We'd be happy to just be a sounding board. We'd be happy to make connections to any of the guests that we're able to. We'd be happy to make connections to other people that haven't been on this podcast, but the hundreds or thousands that we know of that would be tremendous guests for other episodes. Like, we would love to help. And so feel free to reach out to us. We're very available. Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever it's pretty easy to find us. We've got links in all the show notes. So that's my two-part response, Jack.
Yeah, I want to. The funny thing is, I would have said the exact same thing. Like, that's
I
kind of.
stole it.
I know you stole it, but I will provide one additional ask. And the give, I think that the give, I'll just double down on, like, dude, call me. Griffin and I, you guys who are listening might not know us directly, but we are absolutely willing to answer the phone call and provide as much benefit. Like, you're going to be a priority if you call us and ask for help, right? We're going to try to help. We're going to try to understand your situation as much as possible. Even if it's just hey, I got this weird situation. What would you do? We're absolutely willing to do that. But I do want to tweak my ask a little bit. And it's going to sound somewhat selfish, but at the same time, it's completely selfless, because we don't monetarily benefit from this podcast. My ask is that you legitimately take a link up to this podcast and either post it on your own social media, or you share it directly with another veteran that you know. And I hate that. I don't do that myself, but what I do actively do is support other veterans. We had a running belt. I bought the running belt. We've had veteran organizations that I've joined and I've participated in. I do try to support other veterans. And this is not a monetary pursuit for Griffin and me. This is 100% just what we're trying to do to spread the word. And the best way that I can ask for your support on that is to take this podcast and share it with somebody else, so that they can at least know it's out there and transition effectively by listening to these 50 examples of stellar veterans who have already done it and had a lot of advice to give.
Absolutely. No, well said. Well, that's a wrap on this 54th episode, kind of conclusion of season 1. I can say resoundingly that I have learned tremendously over the last year plus of these conversations. I've benefited in so many ways from the connections we've made, from the recommendations people have suggested, from the organizations that I'm now a part of or participating in or learning from. All of these things have been just a amazing one, and so many connections that we've made that we never otherwise would have. I mean, people just through doing this podcast, people came out of the woodworks asking to be guests or asking to be part of this community and this movement in some way. And frankly, thanking us for taking our time to do this. So it's been really rewarding in a lot of ways that I'm very humbled by and thankful for. And then I also want to say thank you to you, Jack. This has been an amazing project to work on together. For one, I've been very excited for the chance to talk with you on a weekly basis, because it's always a pleasure keeping up. And we served together. What does that date back to? 2018 or 2019 was, I guess, the last time we were officially in the same unit. And so it's nice to have a touch point. It's nice to have a forcing function to stay in touch and continue to bounce ideas off one another, because I really respect you. I respect your family. I respect your character and the direction that you and Courtney are taking your family. So that's been a huge blessing to me through this project. And so I thank you for that. Thank you for your work with the Veteran Venture, and the Veteran Venture always goes on. It continues. And so I just wanted to say thank you for all that you've done. And I've really enjoyed the 54 episodes that we've done. It's been a surprising, I expected it to be great, but I didn't expect it to be as great as it has been from all that's come from it.
And frankly, I think if you benefit at all from our conversations, it's just me complaining about my problems and you helping me kind of figure out some solutions. But I think I appreciate your time. It has been an absolute, I'm blown away that we were able to do it weekly and that we were able to stick with it. And I appreciate all the effort you put on the front end and the back end to make this happen. I do think it made us better. Every single podcast gave me like something to think about in my own business or my own life, right? And I think that was hugely beneficial, but it also, even the 5 or 10 minutes before every podcast episode where we weren't recording yet, like that was also beneficial to hear your take on some of the business problems that I was facing. And I almost wish that I would have gotten more advice from our guests. And we tried to stay away from like asking individual advice most times, but I was almost like was making connections in my own head based on what they said. But I was like, I really want to ask you about my situation, but we wanted to keep it as general as possible. And obviously the focus was on the guests, but I think the listeners are going to value that and like get more out of that. The fact that we did keep it more about the transition and the guests themselves. So
Yeah, every single week it was top of mind, like the lessons we learned from the most recent guests, all the wisdom that they brought. So it's been incredible in that way. And I've reached out to a number of the guests repeatedly since to kind of get their feedback on things or continue to run things by them.
And not to pitch it, but honestly, some of the biggest takeaways I received were from re-listening to the episodes while editing process, during the editing process. So it's not to say, like, I know this is a plug for ourselves, but I really do wish that everybody listened to the podcast, because I think every episode has something to offer, especially if you're in that niche timeline of where you're transitioning in the next year or two.
Well, I've learned so much from these 10 lessons are just the tip of the iceberg. We could go several more hours to cover more of what we've learned and taken away from all these conversations. But as we wrap this up, I just want to thank you, every listener that's even spent a minute listening to this, being a part of this, giving us feedback, helping someone else, spreading the word, passing it forward. We're appreciative that you spend any amount of time with us. And Absolutely. We hope that we've made your life and transition process just a little bit easier, one conversation at a time. And it's been a pleasure for us to be part of that. So thank you, everyone who's been part of this. And that's a wrap on season 1. And appreciate you joining us on this veteran venture. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Veteran Ventures podcast. If you heard something interesting or found the show to be helpful, send it to a friend who is transitioning out of the military or considering a transition. We'd also really appreciate if you left a rating and review of the show. That helps us reach more people with these amazing stories of successful veterans. We'll catch you next time on the Veteran Ventures podcast. And until then, go do the thing. Make that decision, have that conversation, and go find your next mission.